All right. Thank you all for the coming to the second advisory council meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll share my presentation here for how to do this. All right. So, we're just going to go through the agenda. We're going, start with introductions, have everybody introduce themselves as a way of taking attendance. I'll make some introductory remarks real fast, and then we'll kind of open it up for public comment, although I don't think there's anyone from the public on today. Then we'll kind of do some quick meeting administration. Then we'll just dive into the meat of the discussion with all the various priority topics that I've already discussed with all of you before. And then we'll open it up for anything else, and that'll be it. We'll go through introductions. If you want, so I'll start. Alfredo Herrera, I'm the GIO. And then I guess we'll just go down the line as you see there.
Scott from OPM. Here.
My name is Stuart Glenn, one of the GIS admins from DEEP.
Greg Ciparelli, supervising planner of the Enterprise GIS section at Connecticut DOT.
Dan Jaya is unable to attend today.
Gary Archambault, Department of Public Health.
Eric Snowden, IT and GIS manager at the Capital Region COG.
I'm Mark Hoover. I'm the GIS director at MetroCog.
Thad is also unable to join today.
John Guskowski, planner with Tyche Planning Group, I guess representing the Connecticut municipalities.
Emily Wilson, Yukon.
Pete Samperi, UI, United Illuminating.
I did not see Meg on the call yet, so we'll go ahead without her for now. She joins later. We can have her introduce herself. I'd also like to point out Eric and Bill, if they could introduce themselves as well.
Eric Lindquist from OPM here.
Yeah, this is Bill Toussaint, now with formerly or kind of with DEEP, but now with BITS, the new IT organization. It's the Bureau of Information Technology Solutions. I've been under BITS for about 6 months or so, but I'm still working closely with DEEP and Stu DeLand as the GIS admins there. So kind of in my new role now, and happy to be here and looking forward to attending future meetings as well. Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you all. We'll just move on. We all know legislative basis for creating the council. Created last year, started in January with my appointment, and then the GIS, the council itself. So we all know kind of why we're here. We're here to kind of talk about all the various issues that are at play for the state of Connecticut regarding GIS and kind of how to resolve some of the issues and how to kind of plan for the future. So I'd like to start out with some kind of key important milestones that we've had in the last 3 months since the last meeting. So first, 3 out of the 4 advisory council meeting working groups have begun meeting and doing work. We will get updates from each one of them a little bit later. We've also launched the Broadband Mapping Hub at the website you see, URL you see below. Has a lot of really good information about our mapping efforts. So far, it is all mapping from external sources like the FCC and various other things. But very soon, we will start putting up maps and data from our processes, and David will kind of give an update on that a little bit later as well. We've also gotten our initial submissions from the ISPs on the data on availability and adoption. And we are in the midst of processing all of that. And we've posted the first GIS analyst position and are in the midst of the hiring process. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the rundown of the important milestones. I think we can just kind of open it up for any comments from anyone. If anybody has anything to say. All right, moving on. Oh, wait, here's Meg. Hi, Meg.
Hi. Sorry.
No worries. All right. We'll just continue on to some quick meeting administration. So I think in the last, in the meeting invite for this meeting, I suggested that we meet every 2 months on the last month, in the last week of the month. I just kind of wanted to kind of nail down the day of the week and to make kind of see if everybody's okay with that and so on. I'll stop sharing here for a minute so we can discuss. So does anybody have any thoughts on what would be the preferred day of the week to have it on the last week of the month, every other month?
It looks like we have the aerial data acquisition group meeting on Tuesdays, which is not going to be the same week every month since it's every other week. So, and it's around this time. So if it was going to be Tuesdays, should stay away from late morning.
Sure. Anyone else have a preference?
Mondays are bad, but the rest of the week is workable.
Okay.
I'm flexible.
All right. Anybody, how about either Wednesday or Thursday?
My Wednesdays are completely booked, afraid of. So Thursday would be much better for me if those are the two options.
All right, we'll do it on Thursday. Any preference between morning and afternoon for everyone? All right, then Thursday's afternoon it is. I'll go ahead and schedule them. Probably they'll be around like 1 o'clock, if that works for everyone. So we'll do last Thursday of every other month at 1 o'clock. I should write that down before I forget it. Actually, yeah, we're good. All right, I can share the screen again. All right, so we'll dive into the priority topics now that we've discussed that. So we're going to go through these in kind of like this particular order. If these are kind of headed, if this particular topic is headed up by someone, by a particular work group, I'm going to have them kind of speak to the update. And then we'll kind of go from there and hopefully kind of start off discussion. So what I'll do is I'll share the initial slide and then turn it off so we can discuss and then turn it back on to see the next one. All right, so we'll start with aerial imagery data acquisition. Here's the kind of the key highlights. And I guess I will let Eric Snowden and Eric Lindquist kind of take it from here.
Well, I was unable to make the meeting, was it last week? Yes. Due to a medical appointment. So it's probably better that you and Eric talk about it. It sounds like you're trying to make some decisions on who to lead the data acquisition projects, and it's probably best that one of you discuss that part of it because you know the details and are on the business end of that.
Sure. I'm happy to share a little bit, Alfredo, unless you want to lead it.
Nope, go ahead.
All right. So, yeah, Eric Lindquist here. So we met, what was it, last week or the week before, to continue our planning effort for the next aerial imagery acquisition contract, which will actually cover 2 flights. We determined that because of the restriction, time restriction in the ARPA funds and how they need to be allocated by a certain time period, that the upcoming contract cycle would cover the 2023, the spring 2023 acquisition, as well as the next acquisition to follow. So what we did at the last meeting was we established a rough timeline of where our each milestone in the project, where we want to be through the summer, into the fall, and into the winter in terms of the the RFP process, development and release process, the review of proposals, reviewing proposals, interviewing candidates, and then ultimately selecting a vendor, hopefully by this fall, and then developing a contract over the late fall into the winter so that we can get them onboarded and ready to go by the start of the year. So, as Eric Snowden mentioned, there needs to be a project lead. We're trying to figure out how that's going to work right now, whether it's going to be housed with an OPM or whether we're going to go through alternative means to get a project lead on it. But for now, the group's collectively going forward with efforts to develop that RFP. That's the next step in the process here. The next time we meet, we'll be working on drafting that RFP, and then shortly thereafter, hopefully releasing it by the end of July. So that's it in a nutshell, unless there's any questions.
I guess I had one question, and that's that, and you may have spelled it out earlier. Sometimes with our office, there's some things you have to, the money just has to be contracted versus actually having to be expended. I'm assuming this is just contracted, right?
Correct.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the money has to be contracted by the end of 2024, and it has to be expended by the end of 2026.
And I should have mentioned, I think it was talked about in the last advisory group meeting, but the specs for the target specifications, I should say, are for to mirror the specifications from 2016 in terms of the orthoimagery, but with LiDAR, the hope is that we can move to statewide QL1 if it's feasible. So that's part of the evaluation, is to evaluate the costs on that to see if that is in fact feasible, but that is the target specifications.
We'll just need all of the servers at best.
Yeah.
To put it on.
Yeah. One of the other things I will kind of add, so with, and I think I said this before in the previous advisory council meeting, but like some of the other derivatives that we know we are eyeing for this are building footprints, contours, and a 3D base map of the state. There may be other things that we may be able to afford, that's going to be part of, optional qualifications in the RFP. And then hosting, we are hoping that UConn will continue to host it like they did the 2016 aerial imagery. So we're hoping to kind of continue that relationship and participation with them. Does anybody have any other questions on aerial imagery or comments?
Nothing other than I think I saw through the email that it looks like we're probably just we may just start with the 2016 contract and kind of work on that, and they're just really careful to replace everything.
Yeah, that's right. Because we're mirroring those 2016 specifications, the idea is to really use the 2016 RFP as a starting point, and then just carefully comb through it to improve it, fix anything that we want to fix based on our last experiences and go from there.
Yeah, and I think before Rich sent out that document, I think that I uploaded to, we have that that Google folder that I think you shared, Eric, that has I added the original contract plus I think all the contract amendments, because those were kind of important as we changed some of the specs for some of the derivative products, and we also changed the specs on tidal coordination and sun angle, because what we had in our original one was a bit on the archaic side and no longer need to be as stringent.
Yep.
So we should probably take all those into account. And this is probably stuff that we should discuss offline, since it doesn't pertain to everything.
Yeah. Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, a quick question, and this is really to Eric, Snowden, Mark, and John, maybe. So it's the way the advisory council set up to have representatives from the COGS, the municipalities on the council. I think in all the topics, but particularly for the aerial imagery, are the things where you think, oh, we have to make sure that we're reaching out to the COGS or to the towns so that they're aware of this, they understand the timing, they can, and inform the scope, that we're not stepping on each other's toes or something. So are there points in this process where we have to have outreach to either of those constituencies that you want to make sure that we are on top of?
Yeah, I would say as soon as you are relatively confident about when this is likely to happen, let towns know, through whatever OPM distribution lists or through CCM, because I have had numerous random conversations already with some of my towns saying, well, should we be using some of our own ARPA money for a flight, or should we be updating our GIS data? And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, the state's going to do this, but so towns should know as soon as we're confident it's going to happen, let them know.
Yeah, +1 on that for sure.
Yep.
I do get calls periodically, but that's only the people that think to call me. So, I mean, I think it needs to be a blast. And we're confident about 2023. I mean, you don't want to promise something and then have, people be stuck without something, but this seems like a surer thing than most of our other endeavors. I think most of you would agree.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been coordinating with our towns, just letting them know that it's probably going to happen in 2023, just giving them the heads up. I know I've already gotten some outreach from Bridgeport regarding like buy-ups and when like the towns need to get involved in that prospect. So if we can get updates on that timeline as well as it moves forward.
Yeah, so with the buy-ups, I think, something that Eric Lindquist and I kind of discussed when we were speaking to the person from Sanborn was that, a good way to kind of update that process is to have it be a little bit less kind of wild than it was in 2016, where everybody can just talk to kind of Sanborn freely without necessarily letting know the primary contract holder. So I think what we would want to do in this go around with respect to the buy-ups would be to just let everyone, talk to whoever is the selected vendor independently of us. However, we would want to be notified of what the communications are and what's going on, and then also have a provision that makes it so that if like a COG or a municipality or whomever else has a upgrade purchase as part of this flight, that we, the state, also get access to that data as part of the process. So those are kind of like, that is kind of one of my thoughts on that in the buyout process. And as we know more, and it'll probably be kind of like once we actually enter the contract phase, we can then kind of say, okay, we're getting close on this, here's everyone that is interested in buy-ups, go talk to the vendor, here's the vendor. And we kind of do almost like a campaign. We should probably communicate it through CCM, through the COGS, and also through the GIS network. Just to make sure we get the whip.
I mean, Sanborn in 2016, I think, tried to do their best to, if they were doing an upgrade for one town and the next town next to them wanted the upgrade, I think they did give some better pricing, just due to, contiguous areas being easier. And so, I mean, if we had a little bit more formalization of that, I think what I recall is that they would send me a spreadsheet periodically saying who had signed up for what, but it wasn't as formal as it probably could be. But for sure, you want to avoid, and we certainly don't want to be responsible for wrangling contracts between a vendor and a municipality. I mean, that would be just.
That's too much.
Yeah.
All right.
Neil, one other thing, and I don't know if I mentioned it before, in other in with this group or if it was another group, but when the data comes through for the from the aerial flight and the contours, we did a test in my office where we simplified the contours a little bit. I think we did maybe we just used the generalization tool and just simplified them, not even a foot, and just by removing some of the vertices in the line, and it reduced the size of the file exponentially, and still retained high quality accuracy that and so I would like to just propose that when this data is served out, either, obviously we should retain the original, the original, however it comes in, but we might want to investigate or review reducing the accuracy by a touch to make it possible and easy to use and consume and serve this data. We went through a process in my office where we took the original LiDAR data came in these big swaths, these I think it was like 8 major sections covering the state. And to download them, you kind of had to, kind of figure out which tiles and which sections you needed. So we took all that data in, we merged it all together, and then we broke it apart by town boundary and included the cog boundary, which I think if we put a little bit of that effort into the post-processing will make the deliverable much more usable for the community, for the state, for anybody who wishes to use it. So that's just, I want to put that in as a possible value add to the data. And if there's any assistance or, insight that I could provide on how we did that process, I would be happy to share.
Yeah, that would be helpful. That's a good recommendation. Because as we all know, like not everybody has like a supercomputer that they can like load this stuff into.
Yeah.
And in particular, CAD vendors may get a little frustrated with the, like additional data that they may not need for some of that.
That's
So
who simplified the contours for was our CAD folks, because they just can't use it. It's just it was too big.
Yep. Nope, that's fair, and that's a good idea. So that'll be kind of something on the back end that we kind of look to kind of figure out as we go to publish the data that we get back from the site.
Great.
Anything else? All right. Well, let's move on to the next topic here, which will be the Geospatial Data Clearinghouse. I think Emily has an update for us on that.
Sure. Should I just go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Can you all hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay. So our working group has met a number of times, and we decided that what we really need to start with is learning from others. We are not the first to do this. Most other states already have a clearinghouse of something. So we spent a fair amount of time discussing what we wanted to look for in other state clearinghouses. So those topics include what platform they're using, both spatial and non-spatial for data, if they offer download, and if so, in what vector and raster formats, and what style. Is it zip files? Is it clip and ship? That kind of thing. If there's an ability to preview data before downloading, if they have mapping tools, viewers, other kind of more user-friendly ways to get at the different layers, if they include data visualizations like story maps and dashboards, and then they're kind of branding, like is it appealing? Do they have a nice logo? What does it look like? That's surprisingly important to get a user's a positive experience. And also how their data is organized and easy to find and use, what kind of help and user guides and videos or things like that that they offer. how they provide access to metadata and in what formats, and then if they have any feedback mechanisms or special things for accessibility. So that's kind of an overview. There are details under all of those topics, but that's what we're looking for. We've divided up all of our 50 states and a number of large cities, and we're each looking more in depth at, I think, at least 6 or 7 or maybe 5. I can't remember how it divided out. And so we're about finished compiling that. We're meeting tomorrow and we will discuss. And then the idea is to look at those that we have rated the highest for some of these different criteria and pull these together into a guidance wish document of what we hope that our clearinghouse will eventually have and be able to do. So kind of summarizes our process so far. We're happy to answer any questions or.
Emily, I have one. I'm going to put a link in the chat. I sent this to Alfredo just the other day. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a guy who keeps a list of open servers and links to all of these hub sites and all of these, portals. So if you needed to review anything else, this is a good way to find a bazillion, over 3,000 different options of how people are serving out their data.
Great, thanks. I did know of that, but I hadn't thought of that in a while, so we'll definitely add that to the list. Yeah.
I use that like I used to use a phone book.
Thanks.
You just increased our workload by 60, Megan.
I know. Sorry. Well, but there's some really, I mean, they're not ranked in there, but if you were like, oh, I wonder what Hawaii does, you could just go and look and find out. It's like super easy.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'll add to the conversation. So on the actual like production side of, like actually making the site, that's going to definitely fall within the GIS office. We are still trying to figure out the logistics of, like making it, but we're hoping to start on, kind of creating the clearinghouse soon. And not to, like I think an ambitious but reachable goal would be to have a good kind of first draft of the GIS clearinghouse up by GIS Day. I think that would be a kind of like a good timing to kind of say, here's the GIS clearinghouse, in kind of celebration of all things GIS. So that's kind of my hope there, that we have a good kind of initial version of the GIS clearinghouse up by then. So any questions or comments or just musings on GIS open data?
It's just a good effort. It's a good effort. Hey, while we're here, we're talking about open data. Does anybody know this is a need, and you guys are the experts? I need to find out where all the public swimming pools are in Connecticut. Is there any way to find that out through like Department of Health or something? Just, this is a need. No? All right, I'll keep looking. Scott Gall, you're the information guy. He's like, no, I'm staying muted. I need to turn off my camera.
I unmuted.
Indoor too or outdoor? Just exclusively outdoor or indoor?
Public outdoor swimming, any public swimming pool. Because I know they're permitted by the Department of Public Health, but I have no idea where to go.
Individual on-site investigations, Megan. To each one of them.
Bring it to
Scary.
Emily, I may have missed it. Was there one of the ones you guys investigated that you were like, yeah, this is the gold standard. This is the one we really love?
I think we're going to find that tomorrow when we come together. I've been looking at it. I think there are definitely a handful that rise to the top, but I can't say that there's that one quite yet.
Does Esri keep like a gallery of like they might have figured out, whoever spent the most money on theirs, there are probably featured somewhere on Esri. Have you looked through, do they have any options in like their gallery or anything?
The gallery is a little funny to search for that kind of thing.
It is, yeah. But they're not going to put up any duds.
In my little research is the hub is definitely a really great, successful way to to go, and that's what we'll be doing. But some of them integrate other ways to do other parts of it too. So I think that looking at all those options is helpful. And NISJIC also has some good kind of overviews about all of these resources. So one of our committee members, Tucker from WestCog, went through and collected all the links, which was super helpful. So that did get us pretty far down when we were starting.
So this isn't like a marketing campaign for a chlorine company. You're just trying to get marketing information.
For me, no. It's for a heat vulnerability index. People need access to places to cool off, and public swimming is part of that. So that's why.
Makes sense.
Yes, it's a noble effort.
I think to Meg, to your question, I saw Gary came off camera for a sec too. Like the answer to usually is this is for the state is usually like who is in charge of this for the state. So if it's DPH, then it's trying to figure out like who regulates or licenses or has oversight over it. And the state often doesn't. And so we don't have the information. In this case, if DPH is the agency of record, then I don't know for sure Gary may know off the top of his head if they track it or if it's in the licensing database. That's the first place I'd look.
Yeah, I checked the license. Yeah, David put a phone number in the chat that I can call.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to derail this conversation.
Yeah, no worries, Megan. I'll send you the contact person you need to speak with.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, getting things done. So anything else on open data? All right, we'll go to the next topic, which is statewide addressing and geocoding. I'll give this one. So this is the one group that has not yet met officially, although I have been working closely with both Dan Jaya and Greg on this topic and just kind of really trying to figure out how best to approach it, as well as David Lukens. He's been doing a lot of work on this topic. So it's kind of broken down into kind of like two parts. The first thing is we're trying to figure out like, okay, you know, what is the state of our addressing in the state, both, you know, through address points and center line. We're pretty confident that the center line is in fairly good shape and very complete. We have some challenges related to licensing of the address ranges in particular, but I think Dan and I have found a way around that. So we're going to kind of, we're in the process of coming up with a plan to kind of move forward with that. But then the more difficult and or challenging one is the address points. The address points where they are identified are in very, very good shape and they're very complete. However, there are a lot of missing values within that layer in the E911 address layer. So, you know, like we've been trying to kind of brainstorm ways to kind of improve the layer. Thanks to David's efforts, we have a good idea like where we're missing and kind of the scale of the problem. So kind of our approach to kind of resolve this is going to be in kind of three parts. One is we are going to the GIS office is going to take ownership of a version of the E911, and we're going to call it the master address data set. So this is going to encompass all the potential uses for addressing. That includes DOT, public safety, economic development, public health, etc. So we want to make sure that we carry enough information to serve all of those purposes and then therefore programmatically create derivatives for each specific purpose. Also with the name change, our hope is to kind of make some of the parties that get nervous with the terminology associated with E911 to be a little bit less nervous and therefore cooperate a little bit more with it. But also to kind of, you know, emphasize the point that, you know, address points are more than just, you know, public safety dispatching. And they serve a greater purpose than that. So that's kind of like the first part of it. Second part of it is to improve the layer by filling as many of the gaps as we can as quickly as possible by using external data sources. Thanks to Peter, we have UI's data, which is fantastic, by the way. It really fills in a lot of the stuff. However, we need to do that for the remainder of the state. We are still in the process of getting similar data from Eversource. They are cooperative, if not a little bit slow, but they are cooperating. We've also looked at, getting data from other different sources. So we're exploring basically all options are on the table. We're looking at licensing data and really carefully seeing if, if we're able to, due to their licensing terms and things like that. But, the general idea is that we want to do a big push to improve the address point data set in one fell swoop to kind of get it to a really, really good point. But once that's done, then we need to make sure that we don't arrive at this position again where we're kind of, behind and we're missing a lot of things and it's just impossible to keep up with as far as the changes are concerned. So that's where we're planning to work with DOT to kind of help harmonize and integrate it into the process of municipalities reporting accepted roads by kind of creating a branch in the reporting form. And then we have discussions around some of the other ways in which we might encourage cooperation beyond that. But I think between these three kind of aspects of trying to improve the address point data set, I think we'll arrive at a really good point where we can create a hybrid geolocator that can serve each individual of those purposes that I mentioned before, and really, serve the community, both public, private, and governmental, with addressing and geocoding needs. So I think the one thing, I'll give a prompt to kind of for a discussion is, are there any kind of uses for address location information that I'm not thinking of that we may want to kind of consider and that might necessitate additions or changes to the schema beyond the NINA standard?
As far as a use, I don't really do this work so much anymore, but in the past I've always had to geocode student enrollment for boards of education across the state so that they use that to help with their redistricting efforts every year, and they have to do that to do enrollment projections. So they need to figure out where all the students live, what district they're in, and if there are changes needed to the allocation of teachers and resources per school, or if they need to move kids around. So it's a very, it's a big need that every single school district in the state would appreciate.
Sure. Any other comments, suggestions, questions on what I described about the addressing?
Actually, too, another group that could probably benefit from the geocoding and the addressing would be the Department of Social Services, as they try to track all of their cases and all of the kids in the system. Having kind of that good kind of addressing data to rely on, because they're out, they're all over the place.
Sure.
Those folks.
Okay.
Alfredo, for the data quality elements or filling in missing pieces, have you looked at something like Melissa address database? So it's a third-party service that does inline sort of address validation. Say you're filling out a form or something and you type in Lake Road, it says, well, we store it as RD and not road officially. And so if everybody starts pointing towards these common data validation databases, then you can solve for not having the problem down the road of the source data system's not keeping up with your expected data formats. So it's just something to keep in mind. We have a Melissa subscription at the state. We use it for our e-licensing platform. Okay. Just something to keep in mind if you're just trying to do like a one fell swoop of improving what you have. They have bulk data quality routines as well.
Okay. Yeah, one of the interesting things that we came up with is that sometimes the lists when we were comparing the E911 and the DOT list with the center line and various other sources is that they did not agree with some of the ISP or UI data or even Google Maps, like the sign on the side of the road. Like, you know, it would say it was like, you know, frontage street instead of frontage road, and like the sign on the road was like frontage road, but then like the DESP and the DOT layer would say that it is frontage street. So, you know, how we resolve that one, I'm not sure, because like, you know, who's right in that sense? You know, like obviously the sign on the road is pretty clear, but if it's kind of different in our data sets, then how do we kind of approach that? Go ahead, Greg. I figured you might want to have a say on that.
Sure. So I worked in roadway inventory for a decade, and we ran into that all the time, right? It has to do with, and there might be some municipal partners on here who can kind of speak to this as well. It has to do with maybe somewhat of a disconnect within the municipalities themselves. So like Department of Public Works are the ones who are traditionally putting up the signs, but by statute, like there's a process for each one of these towns to go through and accept a public road, accept it by name. And then hypothetically, they're supposed to be able to provide that documentation to the DOT whenever we ask, like, was this road, is this road under public authority? It has to go through this process through either the selectman process or through a board hearing. So we've seen that all the time, a lot of lanes versus streets versus drives, some of them with numbers, some of them without numbers, that type of stuff. So, I mean, it's really up to the town to determine what that is. They're the ones who name and accept those roads. I guess kind of being able to cross-reference what that means with something like the Melissa database, like Dave brought up, versus what is kind of the authoritative source. Like the DOT considers themselves the authoritative source. We produce a town road list every single year of every single accepted public town road in the state, but that's not applicable for private roads, which also have addresses on them as well. So like it's complicated. A lot of times we did see the road name itself as accepted by the town differing greatly from the sign, or they would be leading towards a different road, or farm gate is 2 words versus 1 word. And I mean, that stuff kind of matters. It matters a lot when we're looking at doing some of these automated processes. And that, to go back to your other question too, Alfredo, just when you were saying other uses for this address ranges, obviously DESP has one of the biggest needs for auto routing with their CAD system. DOT has some of those too. Like we do, or trying to implement Superload. It's a Bentley product that does some of our automated oversized overweight permitting. It has some other data needs as far as turn restrictions and stuff for trucks, but at the same time, like it does need these addresses to be able to do it appropriately as well. So just another use. I'm done.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's really insightful. Yeah, I think, you know, probably where we're going to go from here is I think we're to a point where we can actually finally convene the addressing and geocoding working group. So if anyone wants to be a part of that, please let me know, and we'll continue that conversation kind of quasi offline from this group, so that we can kind of get some progress made and kind of like at least coming up with a framework to kind of resolve these things when they come up. So like if we stumble across them because we're actually, you know, looking at it in bulk programmatically, you know, would it make sense to produce a list to send to the municipalities and say, hey, here's what we found of like the discrepancies in your town? I don't know how welcome that would be, but I think it would be helpful in terms of getting the data to, you know, improve over time. And like if we can kind of get that resolved and kind of more harmonized between kind of what's out in the real world versus what's on the page or in the map.
And when this addressing and geocoding effort is done, would there be any interest in supplying this, say, to OpenStreetMap, where they have address data that you can go in and get and look at and compare? You can download all of the OpenStreetMap data into a geodatabase, by state. And if we, with this, open data source initiative, if we put data back into OpenStreetMap, it makes those sources better. And there might be I haven't reviewed OpenStreetMap address data lately, but there might be options in there as far as another test to check against, to test a data source to test your addresses against.
Yeah. Yeah. So, from that perspective, I think, like my hope is that, when this is quote unquote done to a point, like where it's like considered in production, my hope is that it will be on the GIS clearinghouse for anybody. We will, like look for those kind of places where data like that can and should live and try and submit it to those places, and then also produce a geocoder that is also, on the GIS clearinghouse or accessible through it. There are some technological hurdles with that last piece, but I think we can definitely make that work. So yeah, like I said, if you want to be part of that working group, I think we're going to start convening it after this meeting, and then we'll kind of go from there. Any other questions?
Just if anyone's interested in looking at the OpenStreetMap data you can get for Connecticut, I put the link to it in the chat.
All right, thank you. All right, next topic is broadband mapping. I will let David take that one because he's been doing all of the work on it.
Hi, everyone. So we finished getting our initial submissions at the end of April, and throughout May, checking through data and getting amendments and missing data from some of the providers that submitted things in goofy ways. I've gone through an initial cleaning and matching of the data, and one of the big things with the addressing comes from this, that the denominator is significant of, total addresses in Connecticut when we're using the E911 layer is significantly smaller than served addresses. Hundreds of thousands of points smaller. A lot of that comes from multi-dwelling units. Others come from just missing newer developments that haven't been added in yet. And others come from, another type of multi-dwelling unit, but things like duplexes that for E911 purposes are addressed as 1 point when we need them to be 2 points, right? So stuff like that significantly hampers our ability to do analysis. And it's kind of, I have initial counts that I could use, but in terms of saying this is the percentage of locations that are served or unserved, et cetera, I can't do the math because I don't know how many actual points there are. So we're kind of at a bit of a standstill with that and need to find out ways of generating better numbers for the denominator to be able to do that analysis. We will soon have a map up for adoption. So based on the subscription data from ISPs, we'll be putting some stuff up on the Broadband Mapping Hub soon. And then that availability map is just kind of pending better data to do the analysis more accurately. In addition, we have been partnering with CCM to do a survey. We've had some hiccups with that, but it should be back up and running. So if you have connections at the municipal level or otherwise that you want to be able to get constituent input on where there is good broadband and not good broadband, I'll put the CCM survey in the link in the chat in a second. And we're also developing some additional verification methods like a no service check on the Broadband Mapping Hub, and we'll hopefully getting more of those things out there.
So I'm sorry, David, I think maybe I had misunderstood a previous conversation I had, maybe with Alfredo. There's not going to be a separate OPM or state survey. You're just going to continue to piggyback on CCMs?
We are planning to do a secondary survey. Right. So CCM is running that survey through the end of the summer, and we want to use that as sort of a pilot survey. The big problem is we have poor distribution mechanisms, right? There's the average constituent in Connecticut is not like waiting with bated breath for OPM to announce X or Y. So having CCM start that process and work with them on their survey and then use that as sort of a pilot and find more targeted ways to look at whatever issues we see there is the current plan. So I have a survey ready that we could use as a secondary survey, but we really want to take the input from that initial survey, which does have about 1,200 responses so far. We want to take that and use that to refine our data collection after that.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess just on the survey end, again, I work with a number of real small towns, and they're already, I'll say Eastern Connecticut small towns. For those folks who work statewide, understand the difference. These folks are already suspicious of government efforts to help, and are already assuming that all of the broadband money is going to go to the big cities, and and the little towns are going to get left behind. So the method of outreach and making sure that the word gets spread, particularly in those areas where we know broadband is most needed and most underserved, is a really critical element here. So working through sort of all of the above, CCM, cost, I would say definitely through the councils of government, and maybe having a representative of this overall effort, attend each of the policy board meetings of the COGS, where you've got all of the first selectmen assembled, first selectmen and chief elected, so those small town folks can do everything they can to get the word out and make sure that their little towns get mapped and get participated in the survey. It's a big issue.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. If you want to, we spoke together with I can't remember, it was Voluntown and a few other towns.
And Hampton, yeah.
Yeah. But if there's something like that would be good for us to attend, please, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, if there are people that I can talk to directly, please feel free to put me in touch with them. I've, through CCM, I've tried to talk to a few different towns, and those that have contacted me separately, but there's definitely this sort of disconnect between like OPM as an office doing these things and then how it's being perceived on the ground. So anything we can do to improve that, please let me know.
Thank you, David.
All right. So I guess we can move on. The next is the CAMA working group and the parcel collection update. I'll defer to Eric Lindquist on this one since he's on that group.
Yeah, so we are just about wrapping up our collection for 2022 parcel data. I mean, technically the data is due to be submitted by municipalities to their COGS on May 1st, but we all know that, there are those that lag behind. So the COGS have to, chase down through the month of May, those that are, not in compliance or late submitting. So it looks like preliminarily, most of the COGS have reported in. There's a couple that still haven't, but preliminarily, we had very good turnout this year compared to previous years. We've had not only close to 100% compliance rate in terms of submitting the requested files, but the number of towns that have adopted OPM's standardized schema for CAMA has also increased into the 90th percentile versus previous years. So, again, as we move forward with each successive collection year, we anticipate the data to be more consistent, to be more complete, and more standardized. So this continues that trend. The CAMA working group will continue to convene through this fall into the winter. and we'll review the data that has come in for 2022. I'll review any recommendations for improvements to the standardized schema. We already have a list of improvements to make for the next version of the schema for 2023. So that's the CAMA side, and on the parcel side, there's still work to do. There's still you know, a need to go back and take a look at how municipalities are maintaining their parcel layers, and work that can be done there to better standardize attribution for the actual GIS layers, and importantly, the crosswalk connection between the CAMA and the digital parcel file, so that you can join the two, and have all of that valuable information right there at your fingertips when you open those parcel files. Ultimately, you know, Alfredo's goal for the GIS office is to have this new staff person that's being hired. A chunk of their work will be to process a lot of this data, and at some point be able to aggregate it into a statewide service, a parcel layer service for the state. And that, when that occurs, I mean, we're seeing great benefits from the work that's been done, but taking it a step further to make a parcel service will be extraordinarily helpful. So that's, you know, a little current status, and then the long range vision. But back to the current status, we're wrapping up that collection now. I'm following up with the COGS actually this week to make sure that those that need to get me their reports, that they can do that and send over the data, and then we can get the data posted in July on OPM's website and on the Open Data Portal.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yes.
So I was part of that CAMA group as well, and I just want to say the difference in I believe this is only the second year of the OPM kind of formalized data collection of parcels in CAMA. Just the difference between the first and second years as far as ease of collection and compliance. I mean, I never thought I would get 100% compliance and delivery of the data from the towns last year, and it did happen this year, and in a pretty timely manner. There's a lot of good work that got done in that group, and I think it's made a huge difference. And on the, you know, the fact that you're hiring a person to, you know, one of their main jobs is going to be parcel and CAMA wrangler. That wouldn't have been possible before the standardization was done. I think it would be just too heavy a lift. Yeah. And now they're talking about actually making the parcel data more standard. You know, that's a lot's been done in the last year, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And you know, if you really go back, you know, real big picture on this, one of the main goals for this council in the first place is, you know, to make it easier for folks to investigate economic development in the state. And, you know, that's a huge chunk right there. And when you add to it the broadband mapping and actual flights to plan on, you know, I think it's hard to argue that we're not well on our way to satisfying the need for that. So anyway.
Thanks, Eric. And yeah, just to add to that, a lot of the reason why we've had such better success this year is that over the last year, and in 2021, we did a lot of outreach to the town assessors, to town GIS folks, to educate them as to the importance of this and why, you know, we needed their cooperation. And that's gone a long way. You know, Jen Gauthier here at OPM, she's our municipal assessment professional who also serves in this group. She's not on the call, but she's been instrumental as a contact and a conduit for a lot of these town assessors, and through the Connecticut Association of Assessing Officers. And even more importantly, her connections to the CAMA vendors that serve all these towns has been extraordinarily instrumental in helping the group succeed. So it's really been a team lift, and a lot of credit to be dispersed among several different folks. So thanks to all who, you know, have really made this more of a success in the last year.
Yeah, Jen Gothier, AKA the Assessor Whisperer.
Yeah. And it's actually our 4th year of doing this. It seems like it's only been 2 years, but it's only been 2 years of reasonably quality data. The first 2 years were really rough getting started. So, but as we go forward, we're looking up, we're looking better and better.
This is all really great news. And like you said, I mean, I don't think this, you know, given what I've seen of the 2020 and the 2021 data, you know, having to kind of somehow wrangle that and make it somewhat cohesive would have been a monumental lift. And even still with the 2022 data, I'm sure it's going to be a big lift, but you know, hopefully we will get someone that will be up to the challenge. And I'm sure we will all be here in kind of support to kind of make sure that we get it done right. Does anybody have any other comments or questions on this topic?
I'd also like to recognize Eric and all the effort you have put in to get this where it is as well.
Absolutely. I think we should probably send Tyler Clay Camp like a bouquet of flowers too at some point, just because he did start a lot of this momentum. He picked good people too and got them together. And this is definitely, I mean, the amount of progress that we've been able to accomplish is pretty amazing for a completely unfunded and unsupported group of just people with vested interest.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll move on to the next topic. So this is the parcel drafting standards work group. I guess so Thad isn't here, so I guess Mark and I will kind of give the update on that. Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. So we've met a couple of times. The most recent meeting, we kind of started to put together a detailed agenda. For those of you who don't know, this group is kind of focusing on not exactly parcel standards, but kind of parcel methods for, like, you know, obscure situations, kind of like a guidebook for people to turn to be like, how do I deal with a parcel that goes over a town boundary, kind of a thing. So we have, I think, 5 people in the group. And so what we did is we kind of went through a list of all the different kind of instances that we could think of, and then we kind of split it up. So each person got 2 or 3 to kind of go research and start putting together the methods for. So we gave ourselves a deadline of July 20th. So we're hoping to kind of get a first draft of kind of everyone's first thoughts on their couple of topics to start the group discussion on.
Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, like, this is very much kind of like we're just kind of putting our heads down and getting to work on the topic. Really kind of to reiterate kind of some of the overarching goals of this particular initiative is really, this is my attempt to kind of organically improve the quality of the data sets of the, you know, like of the actual parcels, but then by extension, the administrative boundaries that they help to form. So by doing this, we can kind of, you know, improve the quality of the data overall, and then also, you know, kind of simplify the workflows and or kind of standardize the workflows amongst all of the various different parties that maintain all of this data throughout the state. You know, like the handful of private consultants that do work for the municipalities, the employees of the municipalities themselves. You know, this really kind of comes from a place of, like, when I was learning how to do this stuff, you know, like when I first started doing GIS professionally, like I really wished I would have had kind of like this guidebook to kind of help answer some of those tricky questions. And it really would have made the quality of my work much better, and it probably would have improved my skills much faster. So I think this is kind of like gonna have, in my mind, it has kind of a twofold benefit. It improves the quality of the data, and it also improves potentially the quality of the professionals doing the work. So that's kind of, you know, from a high level view, why, kind of like the why behind this particular initiative.
Yeah, and part of the like the research we're doing is going to be looking to other states too to see if they have anything documented on how to handle these situations, so that we're not kind of reinventing the wheel here.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
What
All
are
right.
the next?
Yeah, go ahead.
What's the next steps and time frame on that one?
We're working to kind of get a draft, our first go by July 20th. Not a draft of the document, but kind of everyone's first attempt at their 1 or 2 topics that they have. I believe the overall is trying to get a deadline by the end of the year, but I don't quote me on that, Alfred. I don't know if we
I
have
think
that
that is
timeline.
what we've discussed to kind of aim for. I think that's a reasonable kind of deadline for kind of getting at least a good first draft of this. Obviously, this is going to be kind of a living document because new situations always come up or things that we might not have expected. So I do anticipate having to kind of revisit like the validity of the various solutions that we come up with in case like some new technology comes up that makes some part of the process easier, or if something changes in the way that we have to handle the parcels because either one of our recommendations isn't working, or it's just there's a new situation that we haven't thought of. So I think by the end of the year is probably a good kind of aspirational goal for the first draft, and then beyond that we just kind of continue to meet and kind of touch base to kind of make sure that our recommendations are still valid and are still applicable and that they're still kind of what they should be. Anything else? All right. So last topic is just going to be some other updates from the GIS office. As we've alluded to thus far, we are in the middle of the hiring process for the GIS analysts. We received a plethora of candidates that I now have to go through and select them for interview. So we are in the midst of that process, and we hope to hire whoever it's going to be as soon as we can after that. Beyond that, we are also looking to identify who's going to manage the aerial imagery project in coordination with the GIS office, whether that's someone through a contract basis or whether that's someone that we have to hire. We have not yet decided. But we are kind of working on that process, and then once kind of the dust begins to settle from hiring the GIS analyst, we will be looking to hire a more senior position to assist in more advanced analyses and also in some coordination. And then the last thing, which is a shame that Greg had to hop off, but we are very close to finishing an MOU with DOT to expedite the process of them updating and improving the administrative boundaries throughout, in particular the municipal boundaries throughout the state for cartographic purposes. Very keen to say that, put it that way. Just don't want to run afoul of anybody's borders by saying that this is authoritative. But we are very close to getting that all taken care of and sorted out and beginning to expedite that work. So hopefully the goal there is once that layer is completed, we will use that layer in place of the deep layer that is currently in use, try and replace it in as many places as possible, including figuring out how to communicate those updated boundaries up to the federal level as well. And any other third parties that have mechanisms for updating that information. And then the last thing is kind of something to kind of think about and ponder for the next meeting. But we can kind of start talking about it now, and that is one of the things that this council is tasked with is coming up with a 5-year plan for GIS in the state. So Yeah, that's something that we're probably going to dig into in more depth at the next meeting, but I want people to kind of start thinking about, you know, what would we want to see in a 5-year plan for GIS in the state of Connecticut now that we have, you know, we've become not finished any work, but like we're well underway on some of these other kind of like first out the gate initiatives that we've been wanting for years and years and years. Yeah, so any questions or comments or anything else on any of these topics that I just went over?
When were you opening the idea for to talk about the next 5 years?
I was hoping, well, I mean, we can talk about it a little bit now, but I was really hoping to dive into it for the next meeting.
Oh, okay, all right. I was just thinking wetlands and water, but I don't know. I honestly, I'm in so many groups. I don't know if I mentioned it to this group or a different group. I don't know if it was the steering committee group. I don't know if it was the parcel group or is this group, but my vote is in for wetlands and water courses for the next effort. But if I repeat myself, I apologize.
That's okay. Anything else? Don't be shy.
Is nobody going to talk about the cemetery guy?
Oh.
Sorry.
That's a thing. We'll put that under geocoding.
Hopefully, yeah.
We're not going to tell him that we're talking, are we?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, hopefully he's not gonna watch this meeting and recording.
Yeah, a friendly reminder, this is a public meeting, so you
Yes.
are being...
That's a lot of work.
So cemeteries. Anything else? You know, so like I think what I'm looking for right now is kind of like some broad topics that people might want to kind of dive into and kind of sort out, and you know, kind of like wish lists for what would we want to do, what would we want to have, you know, in the realm of GIS over the next 5 years. We already know we're doing aerial imagery over the course of the next 4 years at this point, all the way out to 2026. We know we're improving the address points and things like that. You know, so kind of think about like, you know, if any one of these data sets were better, like what kinds of initiatives might that, or what kind of activities might that enable for you, and kinds of things that you would want to be able to do once those things are better. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd say as we are working on doing these 2 flights, in the meantime, we need to figure out how we're going to keep this going, how we're really going to have a program and we don't have an influx of money. Really, what is our acquisition program for the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I guess now that you're mentioning it, I hadn't really thought about that, but you know, the only difference between us using ARPA for this time is that we're getting 2 years out of it instead of a one-shot deal like all the previous flights. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a sustainable line item of some sort to get these flights done, you know. I mean, you know, one of the arguments that we've made, I think Greg Ciparelli has mentioned, you know, like the price of doing a flight just for aerials is, you know, you could argue it's the equivalent of a rounding error in the state budget, you know. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I have heard that thrown around before. But as far as like a 5-year plan product, I know Alfredo, you had mentioned something about a statewide 3D base map. If that gets done, then you know the opportunities for doing. I mean, then you know you do that with, you know, the address points and the, you know, and all the other stuff plus 3D base map. I mean, you're talking about in the parcels, you're talking about being able to do scenario planning on all kinds of different scales. Just thought, I mean, I think that's one of the stumbling blocks for some people for in the COGS, you know, in particular for doing some of the scenario planning stuff, is it's really data dependent, and developing the data can be really costly.
Yeah.
Right, Mark?
I'm doing a statewide data collection project right now for Circa for Yukon, where we're doing the climate change vulnerability index. We did it for New Haven and Fairfield counties, and now we're looking at the whole statewide doing flood vulnerability and heat vulnerability. Data points that have been a struggle to identify are critical facilities. The COGS are the COGS that do multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plans are a good resource for that. But things like identifying cooling shelters has been a big struggle. Parks and recreation facilities across the state, those are all locally based. So there's other than state-owned parks and recreation facilities, there's nothing available in aggregate for those kinds of things. And then other kind of social service data elements like well, I guess we're accomplishing most of that through the census, but I would say critical facilities as a comprehensive layer, specifically cooling shelters, are difficult. Parks, and then also the water and wetlands, water courses, because water courses too, they're so often a delineated parcel boundary or a town boundary, and you know, we have what we have from deep, which is great, but with all the advanced aerial imagery that we're getting, it becomes apparent that there are deficiencies in the water courses data that then carry over into parcel problems, which then carry over into municipal boundary problems, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and one of the things that Emily and I heard from NV5 Geospatial was that USGS is wanting to do kind of like a regional hydrology or hydrography update based off of the LiDAR. So like update all of the hydrography in basically the Connecticut River Basin all the way up to Canada as like a regional project. I think that's something that we are very interested in, you know, in no small part because as good as the hydrography layer from deep currently is, you know, it's also based off of like, you know, however, you know, 40, 50-year-old maps that were hand drawn. So being able to derive that from you know, like actual LiDAR collected data would be a huge improvement.
Yeah, yeah.
So for the water, I think Stu, like Deep and Stu are the stewards with the USGS and HD data, and there's a lot of opportunity to improve that. And then Megan, what you were saying, I was going to say something a little broader, is that working with agencies that could use, you know, some catch up compared to our Deep and DOT and other really power agencies right now, because some of that information is sitting at other agencies that just aren't as advanced in the GIS realm. So in a 5-year plan would be to help those agencies get there, in which case maybe you could find those layers. So I think Stu might was going to say something about the water, but.
No, I was just affirming the statement, Emily.
That's great.
I just wanted to mention that I know that our office is working with some folks out of Yukon on a climate resiliency kind of project. I don't know if you guys know, her name's Joanna Wozniak Brown. She used to be the GIS person at Northwest COG.
She's also Circa, so she's probably the same effort.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so she's working with me on the climate change vulnerability, and I know she's doing an effort for the environmental justice mapping.
Okay.
So
and I just wanted to say I may have misattributed Greg as far as the relative flight budget versus state stuff. I'm starting to remember. I think it might have been Tyler. So
the other thing, and this is just a weird thing that I've never seen, is there's no data set of all 169 town halls, which I just think is weird. Just throwing that out there. If I get a board intern, I'll have them do it and I'll have them send it to one of you guys.
I think it's in the blue book from the Secretary of State's office.
As a Oh, okay, okay. So there's a list of addresses that just needed to be geocoded.
Don't quote me on it. I'll find
Okay.
the
Okay.
The question behind it should be who reports the location of town halls to the state? Because if nobody sends it to us, we don't have it.
Right, all right, yeah. I mean, they don't move that much. Because you can get libraries and museums, fire departments, EOCs, police departments, wastewater treatment facilities, landfills, brownfields, but I've never seen one of town halls.
But well, in a number of cases, towns have some offices scattered across multiple buildings. So it's a question
Yes.
of, it's usually maybe the town clerk's office or municipal clerk's office, which is sort of the point that at least like Google would drop. Like, I mean, Hartford, 90% of their operations are on Constitution Square or Constitution Plaza at this point,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, maybe you don't want to get too serious about fixing the town boundaries. You're going to wind up having a town hall in somebody else's town.
That's my nightmare, Eric.
All right. Well,
just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Meg, you said there's a layer of brownfields. Is that separate from the deep list?
No, I think it's just a deep list. And I don't know if that's, and I might have spoken wrong. I might have geocoded that myself for a project.
Yeah, so did I, but it is very incomplete.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just thought you maybe had a different one, but never.
No. And I don't know, the other thing too, we used to have Errol Borden on these groups of meetings to represent 211. I know 211, they do an awful lot with their GIS data, and I think it might be worth it to Anna Krober. She's the head of 211 right now, as far as I understand. She might have somebody in her office who might be able to offer you some insight on data needs, because they're always directing people.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's an important repository of data that tends to get underutilized in connection with GIS.
Right.
Yeah, I know United Way in conjunction with the 211 service does a lot of work.
Yep.
Here. So any other questions? This is a time check. We got 5 minutes left. Any other burning topics or questions that anybody wants to ask or talk about? All right. Well, I guess that's all I really got. Had a pretty good roundtable discussion. So key takeaway, I will schedule the series of meetings for every other month on the last week of the month on Thursdays at 1. And we will meet then, and we'll continue to see most of you throughout the various working groups and things like that. And then, like I said before, if anyone wants to participate more actively in the address and geocoding working group, please reach out, and we will start convening that soon, because I think it is now time to actually kind of get some work done on that. All right, and with that, I think we will adjourn. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.